From a passion project perspective, jumping into it, even if it's uncomfortable, it is helping you write a narrative for your life that you're going to be really proud of. And I think that's what came into play with the 50-year-old women who were like shaking me and saying, do it, move to New York, is because they arrived at a point in their lives where they were like, I've made a pleasant life, but what story have I written with it? I wished I had done a lot more. So I'm really glad to not have those regrets.
Have you ever thought to yourself, especially when you were younger, I'd like to go live in a really unique place for a year? Maybe it's London, Rome, Singapore, or New York. Our guest in this episode did just that. In 2008, Tory Leggat, one of our friends, she packed up all she had. She put down all her money to rent an apartment in New York City. Also note that it was 2008, a very unique time to move to New York for a year and find a new job. At this point in our podcast journey, the Ryans and I are talking to guests about passion projects, and this is a unique one, spending a year in one of the biggest cities in the world at, let's just say, not the best time in history. We'll get to more of that in a bit, but in this episode, you'll get to hear about Tory's experience and a lot of lifetime lessons she learned from it. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the show that doesn't have a name yet.
The J-Cast.
Oh!
The J-Cast.
No, we have not come up with a name. This is, I believe, our fourth episode, and we are very lucky to have our very good friend for a long time, Tory Leggat.
Victoria Caroline Leggat.
Hello there.
Yep.
Leggat.
Hey, Tor.
Hey guys.
How's it going?
Welcome to this podcast. Just before we started, we were kind of talking before you actually jumped on the call. We were talking about the things that we like about you and the things that we appreciate about you. And one of the reasons why I wanted to chat with you is primarily your experience as with having a passion project in New York several years ago. We want to kind of dive into like what led that, what that has kind of done for you since that time, and just kind of like your learnings and experiences from that. But there's just a lot of things, even though that's something we really appreciate about you, because I've also mentioned that I've heard a lot of people in my life say, I wish I could just like spend a year in New York. And you are one of the people that actually did that. Like, I know I've said that in my life and I didn't do it, and I probably won't ever do it, but you did. And so that is one of the things that I think is just really cool, is that you did something that a lot of people have said they want to do, and you went out and did it.
Yeah.
So good work.
Thank you.
Great job, Tor.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
All right, that's the show. See ya.
It's been great being here.
I just wanted to introduce Tori. So Tori works at a company that helps people with their kind of passion projects in a weird way, Glue, and is consistently working on big accounts and helping those big accounts realize all of their kind of crazy ideas, which is really tough to do, especially year after year after year. Because big accounts have really crazy big ideas and don't like it when those crazy big ideas don't happen. So first of all, we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about there. And then a few years ago, Tori what was the actual role, Tori, at Techstars that you had? What was the title? It was kind of like a mini mentor, but when you were helping
advisor, I would say.
Advisor to some other entrepreneurs starting their dreams in kind of an incubator context. And then I've gotten a chance to work with Tori for a really long time and be friends with her for even longer. And one of the things that happens all the time, and this is no joke, consistently for, 19 years, I've had people say, Tori is one of the funniest people I've ever known. Tori is one of the best people with other people, like just changing the dynamics of a group of people hanging out together, that making it funnier, making it more warm, making it fruitful and like intentional. And just that there's the number of times people comment on what an amazing friend, what an amazing social just contributor in general. Tory is honestly, I could sit here and write out names for probably the next hour of people that have said that to me. And it's from all sorts of age groups. It's from all sorts of different life contexts and stuff. And so just like Tory is one of the most amazing people that I know and one of the best friends that I know.
Thank you. Finn also got to work with me. I'm not sure his name would appear on that list you would write out though, but he did get to work with me.
No comment. I'm not going to
No
comment on who's on the list.
And she's a huge pain in the ass, I'd like to add.
Yes. Jake, what would you like to add about me?
What is the character that I feel like I always compare you to?
I like this. I like thinking of the answer.
Sneezy.
Oh my gosh, what is her
Captain
name?
Picard from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
No, the writer on she's a famous actress and she's hilarious. That's the person I think of.
Amy Poehler.
Nope.
Liz Lemon.
Close. Getting
Aubrey
Tina Fey.
Plaza.
Liz Lemon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But not Liz
Lemon.
Lemon so much as
A minute ago.
what's her
Tina
name?
Fey. Tina Fey. All right.
Thank you.
Tina Fey.
It's actually,
Thank you.
It's actually Tina Fey. She fashions herself after Tory, actually.
That's
I
right.
read that.
Wait, so Tina Fey or Liz Lemon?
Well, I would say more Tina. I mean, I don't really know Tina Fey, but I don't know Tina Fey. I'll just go with Tina Fey.
Okay.
Anyway,
I
thank
think it
you.
works. What Tor was, what people don't know actually was that what Tor was doing in New York was mentoring Tina Fey.
That's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
kind of helped her get her started. Great. So Tor, we've talked you up a little bit. Can you maybe tell us just a little background of kind of like what you do now and kind of how you would define yourself maybe in a professional capacity? And then we can kind of get into that backstory of New York.
Yeah. So, how Ryan described it was accurate. So I work with our enterprise accounts. So I work for a software company and work with our big accounts, making sure that they get just whatever value they can get from us. So it looks like a lot of different things, helping them solve those problems. So I've worked with the same big account for about 5 years, and they've partnered with another organization that would have been seen as a competitor of theirs to try to achieve an outcome together, which has been a really cool project for the last year or so. Otherwise, professionally, I have jumped all over the place, which is part of kind of the New York story.
Before we go there,
yeah.
can you talk about those two accounts? Can you mention those?
Yeah. So I work with Crew, which was formerly Campus Crusade for Christ. So that's the account I've had for the last 5-ish years. And recently they partnered with InterVarsity, who is also in the campus ministry space. They're trying to work together with all campus ministry organizations, churches that are serving campuses, individuals that are interested in serving college students and campuses, and trying to bring them all together, pooling their resources, pooling their brands, pooling their clout, so that they can see a college ministry on every campus in the U.S.
Let's get back to New York. So as you know, this podcast is really a passion project, of us three, of mine, if you want to say that. And
I do.
So we're trying to learn how to actually create a podcast that's like meaningful to people, that focuses on podcasts. So it's on passion projects. So passion project podcast about passion projects. So it's very meta. And that's why we want to chat with you about this passion project that you did in New York. So walk us through, if you could step back, like what was that year like, and how did it get started, and why did you do it?
Yeah. So when I decided to move there, I was living in Seattle at the time. I had moved to Seattle with a friend at the end of college, and I moved there without a place to live or a job, and everything worked out perfectly. I found a job that was really interesting, and I got to learn a ton there. We met an incredible group of friends, found a perfect place to live. It was just a great couple years. So I felt like I'm bulletproof. I can go do this anywhere I want, and everything's going to be amazing. So,
So wait, hold back. You're talking about when you moved to Seattle.
When I moved to Seattle, yeah.
Okay.
But so that just kind of gave me the confidence of like, oh, I think I could move anywhere without a job, and it would go great.
Right.
So I knew I didn't want to be in Seattle for ever. I had just kind of wanted to try out that city. And I heard 3 different people talk about trips to New York within a couple weeks. And so I sort of was just like, I think I'd like to live in New York at some point. This is probably the easiest time to do that. That's one of those kind of inaccessible places down the road. And so I started kind of trying it on. I started telling people I was going to move to New York and seeing sort of how they responded. And everyone was like, cool. So yeah, which is the way I find I make decisions, is I just kind of step into it. So that's what New York started as. One thing that was really interesting, actually, early on when I started telling people like, yeah, I think next year I'm going to move to New York. Women who were in their like 40s, 50s would like take me by the shoulders and say like, good for you. This is a good thing to be doing. And it just kept happening over and over, which is I think such a thing about passion projects. Like everyone has ideas of stuff that they want to do and they don't end up doing it. And then they regret it when they no longer can. So that was actually really cool confirmation of like, no matter how hard this is, I should do this, because I don't want to be the 50-year-old woman who's like, go do it. I wish I had done it. So that was just a funny thing that kept happening. Yeah. So then I moved to New York. I quit my job in June in Seattle so that I could have the summer off, which was really a smart thing to do. And then I moved to New York in the fall of 2008.
Was that it's not smart?
It wasn't smart. That was sarcasm. Yeah.
You probably weren't out of college for that long, and so you're probably just like tired of working during the summer.
Well, for real.
2 straight years.
No, that's real. So I had only had one summer where I worked, and I kept being like, we're all just gonna keep showing up, not taking a single couple months off. So that was a hard transition. Yeah, so that was my second summer that I decided to take off so I could really enjoy Seattle. So I hadn't been earning money for a while.
Because I don't know if it was well caught in the recording. Can you just say again at what point you moved to New York?
Yeah, it was the fall of 2008.
Wow, it sounds like a really nice time. It was like,
yeah, just like a good time. I had been working in finance with financial advisors, so it was like a cool time for the finance industry.
Yeah, lots of job opportunities, I think.
Just Jake, thanks for saying that. There were a ton of jobs.
Yeah.
I was turning down jobs left and right.
If one were to move straight to Wall Street, you'd think that they'd find a ton of jobs.
Yeah, the great thing was I found a sleepy little part of town called the Financial District. In order to get an apartment there, actually, because I didn't have a job, I had to prepay for the whole year. So I wrote a check for almost the entire amount that I had in my account.
Holy cow.
In a cashier's check, and then I walked across the street to turn it in. I was terrified.
Talk about that moment when you've got a check for all of your money.
Yeah.
That is, I know New York's cheap to live in, but still a whole year is quite a number.
Yeah.
What was that like? You're committing to this year for sure at that point.
Right. Which I hadn't known I was going to have to do when I got there. I mean, I was like pretty committed because all my stuff was on a truck barreling toward New York, but yeah, writing a check for all the money I had was a thing.
Maybe we should just stop for a second. For maybe the Z generation, the millennials, we're kind of joking. There was not a lot of jobs out there during 2008. And so that's why it was a little bit crazy. You actually having to pay up front for rent? Was that a normal thing?
Yeah. So in New York,
something they just did. Is that something they did during the crisis? In
New York, you usually have to prove 50 to 100 times your monthly rent in your salary. So if your monthly rent is $2,000, you have to have at least $100,000 in your salary. So at that point, that wasn't going to happen for me. And my rent was $2,100 a month. So for a 375 square foot studio apartment. So that's why I had to prepay, because I knew even once I got a job, I wasn't going to qualify for it based on my salary.
Right.
Yeah. So then I signed for the apartment. I didn't get it for 2 weeks. And so my sister lived in Connecticut at the time, so I went and stayed with them. And we were sitting in her living room watching the news when we saw that Lehman Brothers crashed, which was the first one down. And then Bear Stearns was like the next day, and then everyone was ringing all the bells that it was going to be really terrible. So
Wait, so where's your head at? So you've just committed to a full year with all your life savings, and now you're hanging out for 2 weeks till your big adventure that you just committed to starts, and then you find out there won't be any jobs for you.
yeah.
Where are you at mentally at this moment around this passionate decision to go to New York that all these ladies said, do it?
Do it. And which my dad was like, I don't get it. Why are you doing this? So that was the voice primarily in my head, was my dad's, because he's a pretty thoughtful guy and he thought it was a bad idea. But I had been like, no way, Dad. This is going to work out. This is all going to be great. So I was more determined to be like, this is going to be one heck of a year because I'm not going to be proven wrong. So I was freaked out, but also like, everything's going to be fine, right? I'm an idiot. I'm 22. I don't know what's going to happen. So I didn't know to freak out as much as I probably should have. So.
But you still kind of had, I mean, I guess you had some hopes at that point that like, still there would be like some jobs, right? Like
Definitely,
maybe
yeah.
at least to like be an au pair, or I don't know, work part-time at a TJ Maxx or something, right? Like you were like,
Sure,
I can find gainful employment. I'm a college graduate.
yeah, of course. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
When I was moving there, so I had worked for a big financial advising firm, and the people in my office had said, like, do you want us to connect you to the New York office? And I was like, thanks, but no, I'm going to do something more interesting in New York than like work at this same stable company. So I thought
I've watched Sex in the City. I know there's interesting stuff there.
There's all kinds of stuff. I thought I was going to get something really cool, and that I had as a backup this financial advising firm. So the backup was definitely out. What I didn't understand is that all the cool stuff was out too, because there were 125,000 people in the city who became unemployed within the first month that I moved.
Wait, what about the lead in Phantom of the Opera? That wasn't still out there as an
Well,
option?
it was,
Okay.
and I auditioned. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, you must have turned it down. You're probably remembering that incorrectly. I guess hold them into status, but like, so you weren't like really didn't know. I'm assuming kind of like, like Ryan and myself, like we had never been through a financial crisis. So we didn't actually know what that,
right.
We're like, oh, that affects people. I guess so. Was it just like, wow, this is amazing? Or was it like, wow, this is not that great?
The first couple weeks were amazing because I was like in New York, you really do feel like an energy there. There's all kinds of stuff going on. The news is all talking about Wall Street, and I was like literal blocks away from Wall Street. So that all just felt cool to me.
Yeah.
Cities have always seemed like exciting to me. A lot of stuff going on is a good scene for me. So I was just happy to be there for a while and getting to know my area. I was so bright-eyed and optimistic. But it was later when I started applying for like hundreds of jobs and not hearing back from anyone that sort of started to set in, that it was going to be really hard to find a job.
Like when a person pursues something passionate, right? Like I'm going to go live in New York for a year. I'm going to start a podcast. Some of the things that block us from taking those on are fears of all of the worst case scenarios, right? And here you are moving to New York, and then on some level, the worst case scenario unfolds. Your dad saying it's a bad idea. I mean, literally, he didn't even think about it being this bad of an idea, probably. Right. So I think that's really just interesting to put if we're making a bulletin board of this conversation, like let's put a thumbtack in that he got off to a bad start.
And sort of, I'm glad I didn't know how bad, because I would have probably decided not to do it and thought this is near impossible. I won't get work, which ended up being sort of true, but I'm still glad I did it because it's still true that was the easiest time for me to be there. And so yeah, it was kind of nice that I was already committed. The other thing too about paying for the apartment is like, no one could say like, you should actually just go somewhere else. I was in, which I think really worked for me. I had to stay there and make the most of it or waste the money. So I was committed.
So what would you say was the lowest point still to come, or was the lowest, have we already hit the lowest point?
No, the lowest point was to come. So I remember I was applying for, I kept like going down in the types of jobs I was applying for. So I was starting with like hedge funds and things in entertainment and like photography. And just, I didn't have any experience in that stuff. So of course I didn't get any callbacks, because the other thing in New York City is you're competing with the best of the best in all of those fields, which I didn't really understand.
Do you remember the first job you applied for? You were like, oh yeah, I'll get this one.
I don't remember the first one, but I remember the low point one, which was, there was a post for a nanny position. So I was an elementary ed major in college. I had just gotten, 2 years earlier, I had done student teaching with kindergartners. I'm like, I love kids. I think I'd be great at being a nanny, but I wasn't really interested in being a nanny at this point. But I got to the point where that's what I was applying for. And the post said like, it's a bonus if you speak English, right? So I'm like, not only do I speak English, my first language, I was an ed major. I lived down the street from you. So the post was for a family who lived in Tribeca. I was like 20 blocks away where I lived. And so I'm like, at least I'm going to get this job. So I write a cover letter that's super personable about how I have worked with kids, all this stuff. I don't even hear back from them. So it's like, I thought I was stooping to a level that I was above, which was also a little silly to think I was above it because I had 2 years of professional experience. But, and then I didn't get a call back. So that was in December. And right after that is when I met a friend of a friend who I ended up working for.
Wait, what language did you write the cover letter in? That might have been where you...
I wrote it in Latin just to show up.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
I just want to put on the record, I think it's an interesting, this was back a tidbit, but insight that being sort of pot committed on one of these projects has a real benefit, which is that like when it gets hard, and it's going to get hard, you have to be stuck in it somehow, to really see it through the other side. Otherwise, definitely will bail, or more times than not will bail, because it's like, wow, I can, and this is hard, or this is embarrassing, or this sucks, if you don't have something that's sort of like holding you to it.
Yeah, true.
And were you just counting down the days until you could leave at this point?
No. In fact, I think I was grateful that I was so committed, because no matter what thoughts other people had for what I should do, it was sort of like, no, I'm here. So even if people had good advice, I couldn't take it. So that was kind of nice, because it just made it easier. Like, I'm going to be here. Let's just make the most of it.
You started to say how you did get a job, I think, right?
Yeah. So along the same lines, as I had applied to like 400 jobs and never heard back. So I went to a friend of mine from high school, Ben, lived in the city, and invited me to a New Year's Eve party with his friends. And so I met one of his friends, Alex, and Alex was describing how he had just posted a position for his company, and he got 800 resumes in the first day. And he's like, what do you even do with 800 resumes? Which was helpful for me to hear, because I understood my resume is just landing in a pile of them for anyone who has a job posting. So he was like, I don't even know how to get started. I'd rather just hire you. So I had been like sort of joking in the elevator with them, because I knew Ben. And so he needed someone who was like their outward facing, like meet with clients. So he said, so I went in on January 2nd for an interview with him and started that same day. So that's how I finally got a job.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it feels like, I think this is just an interesting point, is you went to New York, you went to Seattle with people you knew and fell into some solutions. You moved to New York thinking it'll go just as smoothly. And so you reject a connection point from someone in Seattle from your previous business. You go through months of trying to do it on your own, and then you essentially end up getting a job through another connection point. Is there like a lesson in networking, or a lesson in letting people help you, or something that came out of all that?
Yeah. At the time, I don't think I put that together, but now I feel grateful that I had that experience of 3 months of not being employed, because I had just fallen into a great job right out of college. And so I was sort of like, Yeah, of course. I'm a college graduate. Of course I'm going to have a great job. And I didn't appreciate what they were building into me, what opportunities they gave me at that first job. But being unemployed really made me like appreciate having a job is a really big thing that someone's going to offer to pay you a ton of money to represent their company, to show up to people, to make decisions on their behalf. So I think I appreciated it more, but not at the time. I didn't really have that full view at the time.
I just had a mentor one time tell me that he said, you're trying to get downtown and you're only letting people engage with you in the question of like, hey, where's the bus stop? Instead of talking to them about where you're trying to get, like you're trying to get downtown. Oh, I'm driving downtown right now. Want to hop in?
Yeah.
And that, like letting people engage in the big idea of what you're trying to do can invite and then being willing to let them help you can actually speed up the success of the project.
Yeah, well, and I would say, I've never in my life, I've been working since the day I turned 14 and it was legal. I have never in my life gotten a job that I just applied for cold. I've only ever gotten jobs through knowing people. And I feel like my mom, when I was young, or I think actually when I was leaving for college, said, and I don't know if because she knew this was my personality, it's not her personality as much, but she said, just say yes to anyone who invites you anywhere. When you're trying to like meet new people and make connections, go to anything anyone invites you to. Because even if you don't end up being like great friends with that person, you'll meet all the people around them too. Which is definitely, that's benefited me my whole career. So that was like saying yes to the New Year's Eve party with Ben, even though I didn't know anyone. A lot of people would have been intimidated by that. But that's what ended up getting me a job. It wasn't a strategy to land a job, but saying yes to things, usually leads to other things.
One thing I do remember about that time, because I was working at Rock Bottom Brewery in downtown Denver at the time, while in grad school. And I just remember, guys in suits that look like they're coming from, like a big office building, come to drop off their resume, and even looking at their resume being like, what? Why are you applying here? And I just remember one guy in particular, it kind of hit me. It was like, wow, you are so lucky to have this job at this restaurant. Like, because so many people that are way overqualified for this job want your job.
Right.
And it was like, it just was, man, that was a tough time. It was hard.
But also so good to understand the appreciation of being employed.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes frustrated now with when we have really young employees working at our company. It's like this incredible company to get into and learn from, but they don't have experiences outside of that. And so they kind of get caught up in what's hard about it. And I'm like, I really just want you to go work somewhere else for a little bit and then come back so you can appreciate how much people are pouring into you, how fortunate you are to have a job like that you can do remotely. Now, I think there are a lot of parallels to the coronavirus season that we're in. And now it's like, I hope people understand. I hope I understand how fortunate I am. We all are to be employed and be able to work from home and all of that.
And doesn't your office have snacks like M&Ms and all?
We have so many snacks.
See, hashtag blessed.
We're all just going stale though while everyone works from home. So
it's a tragedy. Right. So what did you do? What was the job?
Yeah, so I ended up working for a custom men's dress shirt company.
A dream job.
Had to become an expert in menswear. My mom called that job measuring men's chests, which was actually sort of accurate.
Were you good at it?
Measuring men's chests?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really good at it.
Yeah. Best in the city.
Best in the city.
Nothing but the best.
How would you lend your expertise to all of our menswear current at this moment?
Well,
which you can
two of you on this call have purchased shirts from that company, so
that's true.
Oh,
big, I guess.
Well, nobody. I mean, do I have a big enough chest for it?
I guess not.
The right size chest.
Can you measure chests with your eyes now?
Yeah, I can. Over Zoom, I measured chests. Okay. Yeah, that's how much experience I got in that 9 months that I worked in that job.
It's worthwhile. Go back to it. And did you hate it? Did you love it? Was it just a good job, or were you just thankful to have it? And
no, I loved it. I mean, it turned out I loved it. I think I loved it because it was a whole new thing to learn. It was nothing like anything I studied, and it was nothing like my first job. And novelty is my favorite. I love new things. So getting to learn, and I don't even really care about women's fashion, never mind men's fashion. So, but I care about it now. So I got to learn all about it. They actually paid for me to take classes in image consulting at FIT, which was really cool. So I was with some, like, even the fellow students were kind of accomplished in their image consulting careers, which was fascinating too. So it just got me into this world that I never would have gone into.
That was the first tailored piece of clothing I owned. And the experience was interesting because I mean, picking out the fabric, there's these several moments where you're like, whoa, this is like my shirt that I'm making here. So you're like letting us pick out the fabrics, and I was like, holy cow, any of these? Wow. But the moment that really struck me was when you went, which wrist do you wear your watch on?
That's right.
You're like, do you wear a watch on which wrist? And I was like, wait a minute, what? That matters?
We'd make the wrist a little bit bigger to accommodate your watch. Yeah, and I'd say, like, is it the size of like a Rolex or like a Breitling? Just to like keep it classy. And you were like, more like a Breitling. Yeah. I don't remember what you said, but
have you heard of Fossil?
yeah.
What's the Walmart brand?
Yeah.
I remember when I got my first fitted shirt, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess this is all I'm gonna do. I can't go back. And
And
I'm only gonna wear this one shirt the rest of my life.
I was just like, I'm only gonna get tailored shirts, and then I had a kid, and I just wear t-shirts.
Well, the world has sort of gone the way of t-shirts.
With stains on them. So who cares?
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I've worn more sweatpants shorts than ever in my life in the last 8 weeks.
Combined.
Even in college.
Yeah. I'm a jeans guy.
Yeah.
But my like day starts really early. And so sometimes I sort of like kind of flub my way into the beginning of the workday, and then there's not a chance to ever get myself situated. So just like sweatpants shorts.
True. Yeah, I tried on this dress this morning because it was new. I got it in the mail yesterday. So I just tried it on, but then I ran downstairs to like get coffee, and here I am.
Here you are.
Yeah, still wearing it. What are you gonna
If you'll notice, I'm wearing a collared shirt, and when Maggie,
out of respect for me?
yeah, I was just like, well, I got to be look professional all day.
I got a big podcast tonight.
Well, then Maggie sees me. She's like, why are you wearing a collared shirt? And I was like, I don't know. Just want to like.
You're like, it is a short sleeve still.
Jake, you're wearing full pants instead of sweatpants shorts?
Who do you think you are?
I actually was. I was wearing full pants today. It was cool enough to wear full pants. And I was like, maybe I'll just feel a little bit better about myself. I didn't. It was the same.
And then Maggie helped you out with that real quick.
Yeah. So you became an expert in shirts. And so how long did you actually spend in New York? And like, what was, like what else kind of was a part of that journey that was significant rather, not just, getting an apartment and working? Like what was it like living there? What was it like, getting to understand like how this crazy city that it's like unlike any other city in the world, like operates, and being a part of that? Like, did you feel like you belonged? Did it feel like home? I don't know. Just maybe walk us through the next couple of years.
Yeah. Good questions actually, because I think New York is unique. I mean, I'm sure other cities are unique in different ways.
Nope.
But New York stands out from a professional perspective. People are there to like achieve in their jobs. So they're, often people move out of the city when they have kids or when they're kind of in different phases. But when they're in the city, they're there to make as much as they can of their careers. And it just attracts, like, the people who can survive there are just really high achievers. So unfortunately for me, people worked all the time. People really liked their jobs and they worked really hard at them. So people just didn't have a lot of time to spend with me. I ended up spending a lot of the time on my own.
Did they work during the summer too?
I did have to work during the summer.
That sucks.
Which was too bad. Yeah. But the other great thing about living in New York and having any square footage, because I didn't have a lot, was that you get visitors. So I had at least 1 or 2 a month, people came to see me. So that was really fun because I got to do kind of like different slices of the city with different groups of people, which I would say actually in hindsight, I didn't know going into it, like, hey, you should create incredible memories with the people who are meaningful to you at this point. But now I appreciate that I got to spend, 6 weeks with Finn in New York, and a weekend with Ryan. No, but that I got to spend that much time like experiencing this cool city. I got to show people around. I got to know what I thought they would like and show them those kinds of things, give people a cool experience, with a lot of friends who are still important to me now. Who came to visit. So that was a really meaningful thing that now I understand you don't get to do for your whole life, because now a lot of people have kids or just don't have time to go spend a week in New York with me. So I'm really grateful that I got to do that.
When I was in New York, Tor, we spent a lot of time on photography, you might remember.
That's true.
And some of the best pics I think I've ever taken were us just shooting the city.
Yeah.
With my old Kodak digital camera. I
still recommend to people, because we had the genius idea of, we wanted to do the Empire State Building, but I only wanted to do it once. I didn't want to go back with everyone who came. So we went like right before sunset. So we were up there. So we got to see the city in like daylight, and then we got beautiful sunset pictures, but then also got to see the city from that vantage point at night, which was so good. So we were there for like an hour and a half, and we got kind of 3 different experiences of it, which is now what I recommend to anyone who's going to New York.
Perfect. One thing that I remember that was kind of a funny to that time period was you had the original iPhone, which didn't have applications, you couldn't download music onto the phone directly. And I think you had service problems all the time in New York.
Yes.
Which I just think is, boy.
Because
that's how far the iPhone's come, I guess.
Yeah. I just started looking at my pictures from, scrolling back to that time so I could take pictures, so I could see the pictures that we took. And I ran into this guy.
Oh boy.
I can't wait till we post this one to YouTube.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Whoa, that was Jake? I thought that was Pau Gasol. To be the icon for the show.
That is Pau Gasol, and Pau Gasol looks nothing like me, and I'm sure we don't have rights to that image, so get it out of here.
Finn got rights to it right before that, I think. Tor, so you're approaching the end of your 12-month prepaid time in New York. I'm kind of curious where your head's at. Are you feeling like I've covered it? I'm ready to get out of here. Are you feeling like I've mastered New York? I've made it in the menswear industry. I've, figured it out. Or are you thinking, oh my gosh, this has been exhausting, I'm ready to get out of here? I'm curious where your head's at as you're approaching the end of the 12 months prepaid.
Yeah, that's a good question. I more felt like, okay, I did it. So not like I've got to get out of here. I was sad to leave, but I was ready. Certainly not that I had mastered it. I never felt like I really did this, because the amount that I worked and the money that I made never made up for my expenses. So it wasn't like I was making it and I could have chosen to stay and it all would have worked. So yeah, I knew I was only going to be there for the year. I pretty much knew that the whole year, and I never really considered staying after that. Which actually ended up being a learning for me, because I had done the same thing in Seattle, where I had said I'm going to be here for a year or 2, and then New York, where I said I was going to be there for a year. And I started to have kind of like a short timer's view on making friends in a place, investing in anything, like, so volunteering with things in those places. I was like, I'm only here for a short amount of time, so I'm not going to do that stuff. And I ended up not loving that mentality. So when I moved to Denver, I decided I have no idea how long I'm going to be here, but I'm going to act like I'm here. Like I live here, and this is where I'm investing, and this is where I'm going to make friends and stuff like that. So that was a good learning.
Was there anything you're kind of in a city going through a trauma.
Yeah.
Was there anything to that? Like, did you experience that? I mean, obviously you experienced it in terms of having a hard time getting a job, but maybe you never got on the inside of that, or were you aware that this was a city going through trauma?
Yeah, it was interesting, because I felt with real New Yorkers, I felt like an outsider. Like I wasn't one of them. But then like around tourists, I was like, oh boy, like I was on the side of the New Yorkers, like walk faster. But you could tell it was a city going through trauma. And what was interesting is I lived on the West Side Highway, but just south of Ground Zero. See if then, I guess he wasn't interested.
Yeah.
Just south of Ground Zero. So my building was a really old building and had actually been hit when the South Tower fell on 9/11. And so that area, it was so real to me. Ground Zero was just a pit, so they hadn't built out the museum yet. They had the plans for the Freedom Tower, but it was just a hole. And so I was so aware of the trauma of 9/11. And then to be so close to Wall Street in 2008, there were like bankers who committed suicide in those following months when everything was kind of going down. And so you did feel that you could just feel that it was a tough place to be, right around Wall Street. But also that the financial district of New York, so after September 11th, all the banks actually moved to Midtown. So it's still called the financial district, but it's, other than Wall Street, it's not the hub of financial activity. So it was really pretty empty down there. So all the banks moved to Midtown. So all those buildings were empty and they turned them into apartments, which is why it was a little less expensive to live down there, which is why I ended up there. So it was also pretty empty. And interestingly, the restaurants weren't open at night because it was only people who lived there. So tourists weren't there at night. So it was really, if I came off the subway in the financial district, it was really pretty quiet there. So it just had kind of an eerie feel.
Kind of looking back on there, and please add anything else that is like an important part of that story.
Yeah.
Like, what are some things that you feel like you would have done differently? What were some things that like really, really affected how you see and operate now?
Yeah. I will say I've been thinking about New York more now that we're in this sort of quarantine season, and it feels a little bit similar. Like there's all this stuff going on in the world. I have been thinking about, I wished I had taken better advantage of being in New York. Like I wished I had spent more time with like, you are here for a year. This is it. This is such an experience. Like get out there and do as much as you can. So I spent a lot of time worrying about like, I'm not making enough money. I spent all my savings. So I was trying not to like spend money. So I was shy about doing a bunch of things. I wish I hadn't done that. I had enough money to make it. I wish I had just like left New York with with a bouncing check, as they say. But just like taken full advantage of the opportunity that I had. I had this idea where my sister, I think, had given me this pack of like, it was 52 walks through New York City, and they would give you kind of the path and tell you the history of like what you'd be walking through. And I was like, that would be so cool to do each one of those walks and kind of see what I noticed and what's the difference in all the neighborhoods and stuff, and kind of write down what I thought. And then I just never ended up doing it. Like, I just wish I had done more of that stuff. I wish I'd had the courage to just like take advantage of what that season was. I didn't have that kind of attitude about it, but now I wish I had. And so I'm trying to pull that into, okay, the world is shut down. We're all in quarantine. Like, what are the opportunities that I have? So I don't have children. I own my house, like I can leave. So what should I be doing so that I don't just survive this period, but that I can like kind of spot the opportunities and take advantage of them. So that's been really helpful to think about from the learning of what I was disappointed in.
I guess I'm actually curious, what was like the most, and how would you sum it all up? Like, what was the most incredible thing about the experience? And then any sort of tips you can give us based on that?
Remember, so the sort of principles I think I walked away from that with, one of my favorites is remember the variables. So I think there are things that like we can change if we want to. They're variable, and we act like they're set, that certain things are fixed. So I was a little too wrapped around the idea that I needed to be earning the money back that I paid for my apartment. So I spent too much mental energy on that. If I had gotten out of that a little bit more, I think I would have been freed up to take advantage of that a little bit more.
What are things that tend to be in that category, like your job, or what? I mean, what are things that we tend to think are fixed but are actually variables?
Yeah, all kinds of things. I think people are like, well, if I buy a house, I need to stay there for like 6 or 7 years, which is like, no, you don't. I mean, you can sell a house if you need to. Just all the things that we think trap us. Well, like, well, if I have kids, I really I want to keep them in the same school. I hear people say that all the time. I moved when I was 10. My sister was a sophomore in high school. Like, we made it through. It made us more resilient. Like, there just are these things that we kind of let trap us in certain ways, that it's okay if that's your decision, but I think we forget that it's a decision we can make. So even I can sell my car and take Uber everywhere I want to go, and maybe it's actually less money, but people just think like you have to do the sort of path that everyone expects from you. And that's the other thing is not to take too much advice. So a lot of people had a lot of different ideas for what I should do instead of move to New York, or where I should live, or if I lived there, I'd live in New Jersey because it's cheaper. And it was like, no, that's not what I'm going for. Like, I want to live in the heart of the city and only be there for a year.
Right.
And I really did know that. So I was glad that I stuck to it. I don't know how I knew to do that, but I'm glad I did. And I think other people have different ideas of what they would want, and they give you advice based on that. So not taking too much advice, but just owning what you're trying to do. And so that's what I think I forgot a little bit. I was there for an experience. I was there for like understanding a whole new thing. And I forgot that when I started getting stressed about like, everyone's going to think it's irresponsible that I'm not earning that money back that I had saved, rather than just being like, cool thing that I saved it when I was a teenager and now I have this opportunity and there's more time to make money in the future. So I wished I had just kind of remembered that better.
Those are good tips. I wrote down: spot the opportunities, remember the variables, don't take too much advice, and own what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
The whole
Cool.
advice on your regrets on spending so much mental energy on the money part, that definitely resonates with me too. Like, because I've been on some trips and traveled, and I just remember like thinking like, well, okay, I can't spend $10 at this place. I can only spend $6. Otherwise I won't have enough. And it's just like, like just enjoy where you're there, especially when you're young. And it's like, you don't have any money anyway. So
Yeah.
you're pretty broke as it is. So, just be a little bit more broke.
And you will make more money when you're older.
Yeah.
Like, when you have more experience, you'll make more money. And now I'm like, oh, I would write a check all day to 25-year-old me to like do some more cool things.
Totally.
And I was instead thinking I needed to be responsible and like save money for future me, which is like, no, not when you're like doing a cool thing. You're not going to do that again. So spend the money there. Yeah.
Both $1,000 that you saved that year
Totally.
really came in handy.
Right.
Really paid off.
Now it's like sitting in the bank, has been for 10 years. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious. I'm going to go into like our pre-show here for a second, but I know that you've been thinking about this concept of like experience self and narrative self, which in my mind ties into like this New York experience. Feels to me like it plays into this, here you are, 15 years later or whatever, sort of framing up your life and how to take risks and how to make, controlled decisions as well. And you were kind of sharing that. And I'd like it, I guess I'm curious for you to unpack that. And if that's accurate, that's sort of a current framework that this sort of fits into.
Yeah. So I heard on my favorite podcast, Armchair Expert.
Second favorite podcast. Behind Jake's show.
After the Jake test.
I haven't experienced this one yet, so we'll see. But Dax was interviewing Yuval Harari, who talks about the experiential self and the narrative self. And that felt such like a helpful framework for me in how I kind of think about things. So right now, I'll talk about how it applies now and try to apply it back to New York, although I haven't kind of thought about that comparison. Right now, so I'm 37, employed, own a house, and my life is really like simple and good. But so my experiential self is really satisfied. I wake up in a day and I can choose what to do with that day. It's all about me. It's what I feel like for that day. I can make it good. So my experiential self is satisfied, but my narrative self, which is like the part of me that's writing the story of my life, is sort of like, well, is this it? Do I want my life just to be about I was happy every day? So I'm feeling a little bit of dissatisfaction in the narrative self, but I have a lot of friends who have little kids at home, and their experiential self, like, it's tough. So their day is not about them at all. Jake and Finn, you guys are experiencing this right now, but you kind of live your lives for other people right now. So your days aren't about you. So your experiential self is suffering right now, but for the sake of your narrative self. So you know that in your life you wanted to be fathers, you wanted to have children, you know that kind of the arc of that is in the positive, even if parts of it are really hard. And so I'm going into hopefully soon start fostering kids. And what's been really helpful for me to think about is I'm sacrificing my experiential experience for the narrative. So my day-to-day internal conversation is, it'll be a lot harder, but I won't have the nagging angst of like, is this really all I want my life to be about? Because I know I'll be doing something that I feel like is important. So that's how that framework has been helping me recently. Ryan, do you see a parallel to New York?
Well, I was feeling like when you think about a life, like some of the things we unpacked here was after you plop down your life savings for a year in New York, there's a bit of a experiential stressor there. That's like, now all the security that I had is gone. I can't find a job. The finding a job is terrifying in the daily steps. But then when so fast forward 15 years and look back on it and you go, man, I am freaking awesome. I took a whole year to move to New York, and I did it at the hardest time possible. And I spent my entire life savings, and I'm the type of person who does crap like that. How awesome is that?
Yeah.
And so I think that's, in my mind, it's a little bit like these passion projects in general potentially have this exact tension in them, which is your experiential self actually goes into it thinking that I'm going to feel alive in this passion project. And what potentially plays out is actually the way I've thought about this is I get stuck sometimes helping others with their project instead of tackling my own project. And what I think happens there is my experiential self, I'm practicing your words, so I haven't, necessarily adopted these words before, but my experiential self is getting immediate gratification from helping someone else and them going, wow, thank you for helping me. Or them paying me, right? That thank you could be verbal, that thank you could be paying me a salary or whatever. Whereas digging into my own passion project is actually just a series of work to get it started, is a series of work without payoff for a narrative self potentially. That's more of, I want to be the type of person that does passion projects. I want to be the type of person that sets aside the instant gratification or the urgent to tackle the important. And so I think that if I hear what I imagine is that having that year of New York and all the scary, hard things about it and all these special things about it in your back pocket is like this confidence component. That's like, I do stuff like this. I can get, scrappy when I need to.
Right.
And even when I take on something that seems to be good, that seems special and then goes south quickly, I can make an amazing experience out of it.
Totally. Yeah, it definitely is a confidence booster in terms of I can throw myself into a really bad experience and get out of it and really enjoy it. So I don't need to be so afraid of getting into a bad experience ever again, because it'll all be fine. Yeah, and I do think with, they talk about like the millennial generation sort of wanting to be passionate about their work at all times. And it's like, yeah, but a Tuesday really looks like showing up to meetings and responding to emails and making hard decisions that are long-term right decisions. But then looking back, that really does write the narrative that you're looking for. Like, you are a trustworthy coworker. You've learned to have high character in the face of like tough decisions. You're someone people can rely on. You've done cool projects and you feel the satisfaction of having moved them forward. But that never feels true every day. So investing in that, even from a career perspective, pays off in the narrative. But definitely, I agree with you, from a passion project perspective, jumping into it, even if it's uncomfortable, it is helping you write a narrative for your life that you're going to be really proud of. And I think that's what came into play with the 50-year-old women who were like shaking me and saying, do it, move to New York, is because they arrived at a point in their lives where they were like, I've made a pleasant life, but what story have I written with it? I wished I had done a lot more. So I'm really glad to not have those regrets.
I think it's so fascinating that in July 2008, their advice was amazing. In November 2008, their advice was the worst advice of all time. And then in, 2020, their advice is amazing
Back
again.
to good. Yeah. Yeah. Which is why you can't really take people's advice. You kind of, what you're doing. If you can remember what you're trying to do and make sure that happens, it's okay if it goes poorly for a while.
So I think something we've talked about before is the sort of Donald Miller idea of living a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's 1,000 miles in a million years or a million years in 1,000 miles, I do not know the true title of that book, but sort of that idea that we're sort of characters in a story, and that there's necessary like tension and conflict, and any good story is going to have like a dip in it as well as a climax and things that we have to do to get out of our comfort zone. Was that something that you were like, was that an intentional thought going into it, or is that how you think about it afterwards, or neither? Maybe
that's a good question.
Because it is a great story, and I think as a character in this story, you grew a ton, you learned a ton, you had great experiences, you had awesome 6-week-long guests, but I don't know if that was like present for you in that moment, or if it's more like in retrospect you see.
Yeah, I don't think I was trying to write a good story. I was just trying to like live a fun life. My personality type is just constantly pursuing fun, which I'm really grateful for, because it means I often find fun. So I think it was more just like, this sounds like a cool experience, and this sounds like interesting things will happen to me. So one of the things was a guy that I was friends with, who's now married to one of my best friends, had been to New York, and he was like, yeah, we just like ended up going to this club, and then this like really incredible musician started playing there, and he just like couldn't get over how cool it was. And I was like, I want to put myself in a situation where incredible things can happen, and it sounds like New York's the spot for that. Now it feels like, oh, I'm glad I wrote that kind of story, but I don't think that was in mind at that point. Yeah.
So Tora, we're almost at time. We like to ask different people just kind of some basic stuff. Just like first of all, like you've already mentioned your favorite podcast,
Right.
Armchair Experts. I think it performs about second to this podcast, actually, in terms of popularity. What about books?
Yeah.
And some other, like, whether it's something that's been inspiring to you or it just could be a good novel. Like, what are some things that you're just like, you know what, if you're somebody who likes good story, here's one for you.
So my favorite genre right now is people who have lived interesting lives, looking back on their lives and saying, these are the principles I've learned to be true. So I think Jordan Peterson probably started that genre with 12 Rules for Life, although I didn't love his version of that as much. But my first book about that was Ray Dalio Principles. So he talks about principles in life and in work. He kind of tells his story, and then he tells all of his principles. So that one's really interesting. He's he looks at his life really mechanically. So it was harder for me to relate to, but fascinating to see that kind of view of it. My favorite book in that genre is Shoe Dog. So Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, talks through his whole story. And the friend who recommended that book to me said the last 50 pages are gold, but you have to read the whole book to understand how meaningful the last 50 pages are. And so it's Phil Knight telling the whole story of how Nike like almost didn't happen 7,500 times, but because they got through it, what he learned from it, and what he learned from it was all people. Like he had to finance a company when venture didn't exist and banks just wanted equity and all this stuff. There were all these challenges, but that's not what he ends up with in the end. In the end, he's like, it's the people who were loyal. It's the people who would stick with me in it, who served tirelessly. So he just goes through who all those people are. And then another one similar to that is Bob Iger's Ride of a Lifetime. So he ran Disney for 25 years and did all the acquisitions of Star Wars and all that stuff.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah. He's a hero.
Incredible guy.
A real hero. Is there any like kind of challenge that kind of came about kind of from your perspective on passion projects that you would share? Whether it's like a daily routine or a weekly routine, or even just like a lifetime challenge, or like to do at least once in your life. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'll go for the daily weekly though, is the part of it I'll choose to answer. My most successful thing in life has been being really intentional about the people that I am around. So even like you guys are three of my best friends and you're starting a podcast talking about passion projects, that means that I'm going to get challenged on my passion projects all the time. And so my closest friends are people who I want to become more like, and not just like the people who happen to be around me, but being really choosy with who those people are, because they'll challenge you in really interesting directions, has been the thing that's paid off the most for me.
Tory, thank you so much for joining and being a part of this passion project.
Did you just call it a pageant?
Yeah. I don't know what I just called it. I might have misspoke. Either way, thank you for joining. This has been really, again, what I keep saying this, one of the best things about doing this podcast is just having a lot more great conversations with friends. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Me. I'm honored.
Thanks, Tor.
Great. All right. Hit that outro music. Thanks for listening to The Interesting Lives of Normal People. If you liked what you heard, we'd really appreciate you giving us a review and a rating and telling your friends. It really helps new people find us. Thanks again to Tory for chatting with us, and also thank you to Huga for letting us use her music in this episode. You can find more of her music on SoundCloud.